the way that feminine leadership has been seen until now is us trying to fit in a mold. Is your intention with Let's Just Be Imperfect Ladies and your work in general to perhaps redefine what leadership means?
Yeah, that's one of my calls, that we challenge ourselves to rethink how do I imagine a strong leader? Can a strong leader also be warm in their personality? Can they be open about mental health challenges to their colleagues? We call that vulnerability, right? That's a strength. We see it with right-wing parties already being represented in government. We have to describe the US administration as what it is. We're looking at people here who are openly dismantling the foundations of our liberal democracies and how we used to build our societies and what so many generations have fought for.
Hello and a very warm welcome to another episode of She Owns the Stage, the podcast inspiring women to speak with impact, amplify their voices and lead with authority. My name is Ana Gumbau. I'm a former journalist turned event moderator, speaker, and I run the one-on-one public speaking training program called She Owns the Stage. And this podcast is all about inspiring women to take the stage and lead with impact. Today's guest is really an example of that. I cannot be happier of having here on this stage, on this studio with me, Helene Banner. She is a keynote speaker, a leadership mentor, and diversity advisor based in Germany, very often in Brussels. So a very warm welcome, Helen.
It's such a pleasure, Anna. Thank you so much for your invitation.
So great that you are joining us. I have to add a little disclaimer to our audience that you've actually been my mentor. We had a summer mentoring program together that really helped me a lot, actually, in finding my voice and what is it like to speak with authenticity with you. So now I feel that we are coming back full circle.
I love it, Anna, and I'm so proud with you. Congratulations on your podcast. And yes, it was an amazing summer working together, and also seeing you on stage is always an inspiration.
You've been quite a lot on stage this past few days.
Exactly.
I'm sure you owned it. How did it feel like?
I loved it. Yeah, actually, I'm in Brussels here because I spoke at the European Innovation Council Summit yesterday, and it was a keynote for women in research. And I came to the conference and I saw just a sea of men in suits, and in the workshop for women, it was packed though. And I felt there was such a craving for talking about female leadership. So I was so happy to see that. And before that, I'm just coming back from Oslo, where I was the main stage host of the SHE conference. It's Europe's largest social sustainability conference on diversity, inclusion, women's voices, and how do we keep going on these topics. And I was the main stage host, 1,800 people, and It was a real fantastic moment for me to represent the values of Europe, of democracy, of the diversity at this critical moment at the moment. Yes.
How did that feel? Because I remember that you started in your first edition there, that you were a panelist and you became a keynote. Now you were the main stage host. So how did that feel for you?
To be honest, it felt like living room. Mm-hmm. And it's also because it's a business conference. There are amazing players from corporates, government, institutions, and yet, yes, it is a conference where, well, it is just the way it is, mostly women go to. And so it feels very open, very natural. I actually learn through that conference every year how a business conference can feel when it is open, when you can be authentic, because it's still a conference where a lot of work is being done. And yet it is also always a conference where I can test myself. How does it feel to speak on such a big stage? And I felt I really mean it. Beforehand, of course, I'm nervous and excited, but most of all because of this amazing opportunity. And I feel very natural, and it felt amazing to me to be able to host on that stage. I feel proud, of course, and I feel the importance also of having conferences like that, and of the responsibility being a host is also you feel responsible for the experience of the audience, the togetherness in the room, and that everybody really has a deep time and a good time. Yeah,
I think so, and especially in such a such an important moment in terms of the ongoing pushbacks on gender diversity, on gender equality, on diversity and inclusion, on women's rights. How did people feel about that?
Well, you always feel at such conferences, yes, we're a bit in a bubble here. Of course, every participant that I spoke during that conference was in favor of keeping going on opening up on diversity, inclusion, that we still have a lot of work to do on women representation and representation of diverse voices. And I also feel these conferences are important these days at a time when most of us, we just look at our screen all day, let's be honest, to come together in one room and to recharge almost our batteries, to reassure each other that we are still on the same path, even if it on the same path and on the right path, even if it feels more difficult right now. So I find these important conferences really, really crucial these days, that we come together in person and feel it again, that we are many, and I would claim we are more people who want to be together, who want to open up, who want to keep open societies. Because we can get the feeling watching the news or being on social media that it's all going backwards. And yes, there are these tendencies, and very seriously so, in politics. But when you speak to people, most people want to be together and live in a very open and liberal society. So it's very reassuring to feel that in those conferences.
I would like to take a step back and get to know you a little bit better, because I've briefly introduced you, but the question that I always ask my speakers that join me here in the stage is, who are you? So who is Helene Banner?
Thank you for asking. I feel like I'm always introducing myself differently every time I'm getting asked. So I'm a women confidence mentor. So I'm very, very happy that we have worked together in that field as well. I founded my own business 5 years ago. Let's just be imperfect ladies, I called it. Because my intention, and I find it important to work with intention, in this business is and was to give the permission to all women to be themselves in the workplace, no matter if they are working as an assistant or as president of a country, that they can bring their feminine, natural, authentic, or perhaps imperfect self to work. That is my intention. And I started during the pandemic as a workshop host online. Then I became a mentor and coach. And then I became a conference host. I became a moderator, a keynote speaker on that. I once got a beautiful feedback from one woman to say, you are somehow our spokesperson, because I speak in my speeches and in my workshops about the in-between, the things that are not said when a woman is, for example, in the workplace, the only woman in a meeting in a very male-dominated work environment. And I want to discuss the elephants in the room that there are still on gender equality. This is my intention. And then I always say in my business, I don't really mind how, in which form I achieve this intention, if it's as a moderator or as a keynote speaker or as a coach or workshop host, webinar host. The importance is that I achieve and keep going on that mission. And the reason I'm doing that is because I was that woman who was working at the European Commission for 10 years in Brussels and in Berlin. And I was very young already in very senior positions. So I'm very, very proud and privileged to have done this experience. I was a spokesperson at the spokesperson service of the European Commission at 29 years old. I became the team leader of the communication team in the Berlin representation of the Commission at 30 and then 35. I was the speechwriter of the president of the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, and also for a brief summer, Ursula von der Leyen. Amazing experience. Again, the privilege of my life to have done this. And yet I experienced something which was an experience I thought I'm alone with this, that I was often a woman who was doubting herself. Yes, I may have come across as very confident all the time, and I am, of course. But so often in male-dominated work situations, I experience a lot of them. I'm German, and that's why I have to say it, in my Berlin years, where in the political sphere of the German government, around the German government, it was always, I felt I was a very exotic person, being a young woman in a leadership position, and I felt very well treated in a specific way that I didn't expect, to be honest, and I kept it all for myself. And that experience costs energy every day. And I realized for so many women, and that is why I founded my business and wanted to open spaces for women to actually talk about the things that we just deal with as women in the workplace, because we think, or at least I thought, I just have to become a bit tougher still and learn to kind of get over it and, become more assertive. But in reality, I myself sat in all of these women empowerment trainings where I've been told how to show myself and show up and become more visible and perhaps more competitive in order to make it. And I realized I had this one aha moment in one of these women leadership programs where I thought, is it possible they're trying to show and teach all of these amazing women here around the table how to change and how to become more adapting and fitting into a leadership or power world that has been perhaps created for men by other men?
And that was the moment where it clicked.
It clicked totally when I realized I saw these, I really had this aha moment. I was sitting in a women leadership training. It was here in Brussels with 8 other women. And I looked around the table and I thought, oh my God, I'm looking up to these ladies. They are so inspiring to me. I'm curious to getting to know them. And yet the trainer here tells us we're not yet good enough. We need to change. We need to become harder and tougher. And I thought, but what makes us feminine, or what makes us as women, we bring so incredible leadership qualities to the workplace, our empathy, yes, our warmth, yes, our care for colleagues, which is a hardcore leadership skill in times when so many colleagues are struggling with mental health. And I realized I want to become, and this is also my reminder to myself, I want to dare to be imperfect, bring my feminine self to work, because I myself, I admit, I for a long time looked up to my male colleagues, wanted to become a bit more like them, to be more rational, more structured, more clear, and less emotional, less sensitive in my work. And I'm putting a long story to introduce myself, but this is really who I am. I had this story and this experience in a leadership role at the Commission. And I made it basically now my calling to make it visible what other women go for, almost every woman goes through in the workplace, to be a voice for them and to support them in feeling confident in the qualities we women already have. This is very important to me.
Indeed, it feels that the way that feminine leadership has been seen until now is us trying to fit in a mold, right? Trying to get in, call it masculine energy, call it assertiveness, call it however you want, but really try to bend ourselves over in order to fit in this definition, perhaps very narrow definition of leadership, right? So is your intention with Let's Just Be Imperfect Ladies and your work in general to perhaps redefine what leadership means?
Yeah, that's one of my calls, that we challenge ourselves to rethink how do I imagine a strong leader? Can a strong leader also be warm in their personality? Can they be open about mental health challenges to their colleagues? We call that vulnerability, right? That's a strength when we can manage our emotions. Many women tell me they get feedback. Even yesterday, I got a woman coming up to me saying, "What do I say at work?" One of my colleagues approached me to say, "I'm too emotional at work," because we still frame this term of being emotional as unprofessional. Emotions don't belong to the workplace, although
oh dear,
emotions are human. They are neither female nor male. And,
absolutely.
To reframe really, what is it to be a strong leader? Of course, it is powerful to show emotions. That doesn't mean we start, bursting out in tears in every meeting, but more to be conscious, to feel the feelings rather than suppressing them, managing them, and being able to communicate them in an empathetic way. Because I would claim everybody is emotional in the workplace, but if we suppress all our emotions, we become frustrated, impatient, short-nerved, and we will not be good leaders, right? So, absolutely, that's spot on. I want to challenge our definition of leadership and call in, the feminine in our idea of leadership. And I'm not saying that the feminine is more important or better than the masculine, because I have very strong masculine leadership strengths as well, and I find them important. But it's about balance in us and in the workplace, because what we're really missing at the moment still in our workplaces is not, still women. Of course, we're still on a long path, but we have thankfully many women who are now the chairwomen, the presidents, the prime ministers. But what is still missing, and that is still often still decades ago, is the work culture. Hasn't yet adapted. We still reward in our workplaces very much masculine strengths when it comes to promotions, hiring, And by the way, that's also an economic thing. You know, who gets the pay, who gets the promotion? If it's still very masculine, then no wonder that we have the pay gap and the pension gap.
Exactly. And structural change takes time, and it's tough to navigate such spaces and try to lead with change, especially when we have such a traditional definitions, I think, still on leadership. But I'm also curious because you had this aha moment. Mm-hmm. And then you took a leap of faith at the end of the day into this idea, into this project, into this calling, right? You left what I guess was quite a stable job at the European Commission to get started as an entrepreneur. How did that feel?
It was one of the most amazing moments of faith, in my life, of course. But I think I'm speaking for many. I also speak to so many women, mentoring them who have this thing inside of them where they feel I had this feeling of I'm very successful, yes, but in my heart and inside of me, my inner success criteria were not yet met. So we sometimes have this external success on our CV; it looks amazing, and I was also very, very proud of what I had achieved because my goal at the European Commission, where I really wanted to work there and I landed in communication jobs, was I wanted to find out how the EU works. I mean, really, I studied European governments and communication. I was a trained journalist like you in the beginning. And my quest to come to Brussels and to work here was really, I wanted to find out how do they do this behind closed doors, 27 countries coming together and finding compromise. I need to work there to find out. So my first job was, I was a trainee, then I was a secretary, and I didn't really care because these jobs opened me doors to find out about my question. And I think maybe it was also the reason why I landed in communication jobs. Spokesperson, press officer means you represent the EU to the outside or even defend. And so it was basically becoming my job to explain how the EU works behind closed doors to other people. So I think there are no coincidences. And the moment I was on the team of Ursula von der Leyen, the now president, and the first woman who became president of the European Commission, and I had the privilege of being there in Strasbourg when she held her candidate speech and she got elected, I really had this voice in my head telling me, you're done. You've seen how a president is made, the first woman, democracy at play at European level. I really had this feeling of completion, satisfaction. I'm done here. And even if we may have a contract that says you can stay here until the rest of your life, I have never seen my career like that. I see it in chapters and projects, and as if that project was closed. And that's helped me to say yes to something new that had been growing in me for a long time. And this story of having been this woman in the room and opening up to others about it, I had this idea of making it a project, or I need to do something with it. And related to that was also, this is very personal ambition, but I, of course, at the European Commission, being a spokesperson, a speechwriter, you basically represent values that I absolutely, stand for and live for, the European values, but you speak on somebody else's behalf. And at my mid-30s, I really had this quest, hey, what is your voice, Helen? What do you want to say? What do you have to contribute? And I felt, I think I have a powerful story to tell. I think I want to share that. And I always had this feeling, if I can help one person with that, it's going to be worth it. So I saved up and I paused my career and I quit. And I knew, okay, and I give myself time and really also the freedom to create and to learn. To be honest, also, I was a civil servant, how to become an entrepreneur, how to make money with a project or a product and a service. And it's been such a great experience doing that. So from the outside, it may look like, okay, she just quit the job to do something new. Of course, there's always a lot of personal development behind that and motivation and also, desire to grow. I mean, that was really the real intention behind it.
And how did that feel to put yourself on the spotlight after so many years of, indeed, representing someone else, speaking on behalf of someone else? How did that feel for you? And how was this process of finding your voice or owning your voice like?
It's the best thing I've ever done in my life. It has made me very, very happy. And even if you're sometimes poor as an entrepreneur, you're happy. I mean, that's an amazing experience that there are struggles and insecurities and existential fears as an entrepreneur. But whenever I met my friends, they're like, oh my God, you're shining. You have this energy. And
I can relate.
You can relate, right? Where does it come from, Anna? It comes from the freedom that you can be yourself.
Exactly. You know, it's really funny when, there's been points in time where I've really struggled financially, and then someone, like a friend of you, comes and tells you, oh my God, Anna, but you're shining. You are really killing it. I was like, if only you knew. But at least I'm glad that at least externally there's the impression that things are going well. At least I feel that my communications person is doing really well my work.
Yeah, and I think that is part of this inner success that I meant, right? Maybe to the outside, let's say the financial reward is not yet there, or the economic success, it will come anyway. I always say, if we follow our inner success criteria, it's a mathematical equation that the economic success will follow. Yeah. Even the timeline doesn't matter so much. It will come back, because what we send out, right? And you too on stage, it's amazing, your energy. It will come back to us. So it's a little bit with that. I've really felt I looked for a form, having worked in a huge organization, you always have a role and it's very predefined. And even within the commission, I always had roles that were very entrepreneurial in a way. When you are a spokesperson, when you are a speechwriter, you have to be very creative. You're a little bit beyond the hierarchies. You have to be able to speak to everybody. And I always needed a lot of freedom in my jobs. And as a self-employed freelancer, you're basically baking your own job around your best qualities.
Yeah,
to find
indeed.
out, right? To find out, to carve out almost, where's my zone of genius? So not only it's the book. It will come back to me. Guy Hendricks. I think the Big Leap. Right? Yeah, exactly. The Big Leap. The book recommendation by Guy Hendricks. He talks about a zone of excellence that we all have as people in our competencies, and a zone of genius. And a zone of excellence is when we're really good at something, and when our colleagues tell us, you're so good at this, we need you here. You're indispensable to our team. And yes, I was really good as a political communication strategist and speechwriter. And, you may get that feedback from colleagues, we need you here. And yet deep inside you, I have so much more to give, but I cannot express it in this job or in this form. So I guess my entrepreneurial life, and maybe I would be curious to hear your experience too, gave me the opportunity to find a form, which was speaking, webinars during the pandemic, then speaking on bigger and bigger stages, and this week in Oslo on a huge stage. What is the form that I need in order to be in my full potential? And as an entrepreneur, you find it yourself. And so that you can be in your zone of genius. And that is a zone where you feel you're not even working. It feels play zone. And this week when I was on stage speaking in front of thousands of people, it seriously felt like I'm playing. It's not work. And yet it took weeks of preparation and stress, of course, sleepless nights and so on. But when you're there, you're like, this is easy. I think, and when you really find this is probably my biggest talent, and then you try to find out, how can I use this biggest talent for good, for my mission, or for something that matters? I love this experience.
Yeah, fully agree. I think for me, it's been now a bit more than 3 years since I'm freelancing. And I think it's taking me a little bit of trial and error. I think in this few years, what have I done? I've been still a journalist for some time. I've done copywriting work or like ghostwriting for different organizations and individuals. I've moderated a lot of events. I've done podcasts. I've mentored journalists and other young people. I feel that I've lived several lives already in this past 3 years, and I think only now, and this is, I guess, where She Owns the Stage comes in as well. I'm really starting to find out, like, all right, like what is perhaps my zone of genius indeed? What are perhaps the things that I genuinely enjoy doing? Now I'm realizing that, doing perhaps copywriting or kind of ghost writing sort of things is perhaps not my cup of tea. It doesn't show up all my strengths. I've been a podcast producer, so doing all the work behind the scenes, and I realized, no, actually what I like is having the microphone in front of me.
This is your zone of genius, right?
Indeed,
zone of excellence
indeed.
is the writing or the producing.
Yeah. We should rename this studio the Zone of Genius.
Yeah, no, it is a great term, and I think it's a quest in all of us, right? And I don't think I'm there either yet. I like your phrase of it's trial and error. Totally. I started with online webinars, and you keep going, right? And we get always little tips from outside. I sometimes got the question, are you also moderating events? Are you a moderator? And I'm like, I think so. Yeah, okay, let's do it.
Could be. Uh-huh.
And then you try that. And I find it an important barometer as well to follow our feeling, what feels good. Right? Do you have that too? I mean, it's not always only what makes me money or how can I be the cleverest, smartest entrepreneur who scales up an app or something. I mean, I've looked into all of that in terms of online marketing or online business, but I realized, I don't feel good doing that. I want to connect directly with people. I don't want to become a saleswoman of a product. I want to create rooms. I want to create safe spaces. I love that because that makes me feel my best and at my best. So really following our feeling is also a privilege in being a freelancer.
I think so. And being able to also be selective when it comes to the people that you work with, that you work with people that you genuinely enjoy working with. This is a key criteria for me. Working with organizations with purpose. I normally avoid working with fossil fuel companies or industries that I don't. And also, by the way, that includes lately political parties as well, because I've been approached by the entourage of the kind of far-right political groups as well. And that's a big red line for me, not only in terms of reputation, but simply because it's something that I just do not believe in, and that I just feel that I would be really constrained and it would just not be me and the things that I stand for. So I think
thank you
being
for saying
selective
no.
is so important, I think.
Yeah, thank you for saying no. It's basically saying yes to something as well, right? When you say no to these things. And that's, again, to me, the sign that we can change the world. Any business changes the world by you're selective about who do you give your visibility to, which companies or which political movements, for example. And by being selective here and giving your talent and your experience only to those that you care for, that are aligning with your vision and your values, of course we're changing the world. We have a responsibility also as business owners. And I love that, especially as women entrepreneurs. Anna, we are.
Absolutely.
And I support so many women who say, I want to found a business, because I really believe that women found differently. I see it so much, how much they found in different areas, often caring, often with purpose. Women, well, this is a generalization, but we see it in studies that women often found a business that has a purpose other than just making money. I know how I would have given up already 1,000 times on my entrepreneurial path if I had just had the idea of having an app that I want to scale or something, or producing a new coffee capsule or something. I think I would have given up already after a year, because the only purpose would have been to make money. If it was for that, I think I've been sitting crying so many times already, thinking this is it. I can't do it anymore. It's so tough. And then with tears in my eyes, I was sometimes already, pouring the bubbles again in my glass and saying, you keep going, because I believe it's, it's the purpose and the mission that drives you. It is absolutely changing. And by putting our focus on that and giving our services to these organizations that we care for, I think, we're changing the world. And that's also so important at these days. I mean, you're pointing at it on where we see so many very worrying and serious tendency in our society where we have to take responsibility as businesses, because some governments are going into a direction that we're not supporting, right? Yeah,
and I think in Europe itself, there is a question that I wanted to ask you, because I remember once hearing you talk about that spring, that summer in Strasbourg, where you were involved in the speech that President von der Leyen gave when she got elected for her first mandate, and how she really doubled down on this idea that she wanted to have a full gender parity in the Commission, so really 50-50, and she really strived very actively for that back in 2019 on her first mandate. On her second mandate, which started at the end of 2024, it was way more difficult to reach that gender parity. We are not even there yet. I think it's somewhere like between 60% male, 40% female. And that took a lot. Initially, with the first initial names that member states put forward were like maybe 30% of women in the cabinet and in the College of Commissioners. So I'm curious to understand your perception on where are things going also in Europe. It seems a lot of people are very worried about that. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, number one, let's stay optimistic. I find it important to spread some positive confidence. I'm not saying we should be naive, but because sometimes with our conversations, we have to be careful also because we are part of the negative spiral right? Also in the media, we see it a lot, how everybody jumps on that. And why don't we spin it also or see the different perspective? Number one, it's so positive that in 2019 she pushed for that parity and she achieved it or almost achieved it. Most member states had nominated 2 candidates.
Indeed.
And then she achieved it. I mean, we still have to always see also who's then becoming head of cabinet, what's the parity there, who are the directors general in the commission. That's always important that we also look a little bit one layer down. We still often see, this is an important argument for all of those who say, hey, but look, we have achieved gender equality. What more do you want? I also want to see it in the structures and in the decision-making structures and in the work culture that follows. And you're absolutely right. We saw a more challenging environment this time around. And yet on the positive side, what I have really appreciated this time, though, was there was a huge media debate as well. I mean, it was a huge topic in the media. I had never seen this before. Also beyond the Brussels bubble media, I would say, about the purpose of gender equality, there was even a sort of shaming going on of those member states who were not following suit. And I thought, that's new. That we hadn't had this before. And yes, that made a difference, at least to me, feeling represented and feeling that something's not right, that the difference was that even mainstream media, let me call it like that, who would have perhaps 10 years ago still kind of sidelined such a topic, would take it seriously in the newsroom and say, this is a story, we need to report about it. That is a shift, that we have a serious discussion about it. I remember my internship, my Blue Book internship was in 2009 with Margot Wallström, the Swedish commissioner, who later became the Swedish foreign minister and one of the first supporters of a feminist foreign policy. And I remember already how she here in Brussels, was making the point for women representation and how I witnessed it in one room and one conference where she spoke, how she really got rolling eyes for that and kind of like, why does she talk about that women topic again? So I think this is what we have to see, that we are already talking about it differently. And yet you're absolutely right that it's, of course, worrying that we see a backlash and that, it's not being taken seriously, because in the end, policy results will be better if, like in every company, when we have more diversity in the decision-making representation, of course, the results will be better. So, it's not a good result, but still, we also have to look at the narrative and the debate that has definitely changed.
But there seems to be a pushback on diversity and inclusion, more broadly speaking, especially, for instance, if we see in the US how all the terms around gender identity and racial diversity have been banned. Do you see perhaps this wave also coming to Europe as well?
Yes, it's already here. I mean, we see it with right-wing parties already being represented in governments, the Netherlands, Finland, and I hear from my friends in Finland, for example, how gender equality programs are being cut down. It's happening here in Europe. And we have to describe the US administration as what it is. Some people say, hey, it's going to be different again in 4 years, but I think we have to name it. This is not yet another administration. We're looking at people here who are openly dismantling the foundations of our liberal democracies and how we used to build our societies and what so many generations have fought for. So this is not a policy change to me. I don't think it's right to call it like that because I see it sometimes in some media. We're looking at a fundamental dismantling of, the
fundamental right, indeed.
Of the foundations of our living together, of our Western democracies, of our alliances. I'm coming back to our point on, as businesses, for example, every business has the chance to take a stand. I see many businesses, also huge corporations who are adopting, the regulation that is on right now on scrapping D&I, diversity and inclusion programs, or even the wording from their programs, and that worries me very seriously because I also see other universities, for example, who openly send open letters and say, we are not participating in that. And I think this is a time now where we cannot just watch and see anymore. I mean, to see we have taken for granted for a long while and we had the absolute freedom and privilege. That's fantastic, our generation, that we grew up like that with these values. But it's now a time where I think we have to speak up again and spell out what we stand for. And that's why I'm coming back to the conferences. It's so important to come together because when we're alone, we often feel like, I can't possibly speak out, too dangerous, or what are the repercussions? But when we come together and group up, it will be much easier to take a stance because I still believe we're more those people and those organizations who want to keep going on these values. And when it comes to scrapping the programs or going backwards, again, I look at intention. Are you still standing for something or not? We're also looking at an economic recession now with the tariff situation. And of course, the economics, it's a very serious time. And even if for financial reasons, diversity, inclusion, women's rights may not get so much attention anymore from businesses, we still have to look, okay, but what's your intention? Do you still stand for something? That does make a difference how businesses speak to their employees, what they represent, so that people feel represented and that people also feel like, I want to work there. I mean, that's a serious also question of workforce. In a few years, will people want to stay an attractive employer is definitely a thing after the crisis then.
I think so. And I think this also exemplifies the importance of our work, no? That right now more than ever, women must speak up. We need to open those doors and create those doors for them. So I would want to come back to this question on how do we speak with impact, because if there is a word that I think summarizes you very well and summarizes your work very well, is the question of authenticity, which is something that has already come up. And I'm curious to hear from you, what are the main barriers that prevent us, or women in particular, to speak up authentically in work-related settings, on stages, in boardrooms? What do you think?
My personal experience was my perfectionism. That's why I called my project Let's Just Be Imperfect, ladies. It's a reminder to myself as well. And perfectionism is a term that basically, if I'm really honest, it comes back to the feeling of I'm not good enough. I'm probably not good enough, so I try to please and fit into what is here or the system or the expectations of others and be good enough for them. So being in this pleasing attitude, and that actually puts us though in a situation where we cannot really be authentic because we're constantly focused on what other people look for, and so we become like pleasers and we're nice, and that doesn't work. Then we are stiff, and then we cannot really tap into our full creativity and potential. So that is definitely a back burner or a break for authenticity, our perfectionism. But let's call out where it comes from. I work with so many women as well who feel like, can I really step forward? I'm more like in a meeting, for example, observing first before I take the floor. We have just discussed how we also see so many women apologizing or saying, I'm not an expert, or basically apologizing for taking the floor, for taking space.
Yeah, if I may add my points into this discussion where I've actually been invited to speak and to provide these main points, right?
Yes, exactly. We are the experts. We're having our roles at the table. We are the leaders, the managers, and yet still we're like, if I may come in. And I'm here to spell that out, but also not to blame any woman who's ever felt like that, because it also comes, and we're coming back to that, a structural situation in meeting rooms where it is shown in studies that women get interrupted 3 times more than men. The ideas of women are often not called out, but it's Andrew or Dennis who has, who's stealing the ideas. So women are very much framed of, or they are gratified in our society for holding themselves back, for being nice and smiling rather than outspoken, and tough. And so let's also look at these structural situations. And this is, what I also do in my public speaking mentorings and coachings is to recognize that, because so that we women, we don't feel bad. Oh yes, I've also apologized a lot of times for speaking, and yet let's not blame ourselves, but let's just observe it. I've created one training that is called Stop Saying Sorry training.
Yes.
Because we so often say, I'm sorry, but I have one more question. And yet, no, I have one more question. Please, it's our time to speak. So it's on the one hand about what doesn't make us authentic is on the one hand our own, little voice inside that may constantly be on, am I good enough? What will they think? I'm sure this is crap. You should have prepared more. How they look at me. These are all the voices that are in our head. This is definitely holding us back. That's why in my mentoring we work on exactly that voice, because that's much more important than hand gestures or body language. I'm absolutely certain and this is what happens also in the trainings. It's the body language and the confidence physically comes anyway from believing that we deserve this seat here and that our voice matters, no matter if everybody in the room is like looking at their phones or so. We need to keep going and yes, to give confidence to women to believe that their voice matters, because especially maybe because we are new or different in a field, it is even more important to speak out because we often have no idea. Authenticity is also contagious, how much we inspire someone who says, oh my God, she speaks like me with that weird little accent, and somebody is like me. This is so important. Or
and
with
she's rocking it.
Yeah, or with our hair, or our skin color, or our body shape. To see someone who's out there is so important. I always say we're sometimes rolling out our own red carpet in front of us, right? We are doing the job of being the first, and at the same time, we have to have the confidence. And here's a call to all men listening or watching. Of course, it is also, it made a huge difference in my life to have men who would actually support me in that. And by that, I don't mean that we need men to support us and to give us the space. No, we can claim it ourselves, obviously. But it's called male allyship, and I'm also involved in training that, or you could call it inclusive leadership, is to support men with the skills of how do I give, if let's say we're in an interview panel and it's only men in the interview panel and one woman, how do I give that woman the confidence that she or not intimidate her, this consciousness of what is actually happening in the room where a woman is the only one. It's very important that we speak to men about that and that we give them the confidence that they can hold space for someone or make space for women to actually feel safe to take their space that they deserve.
Absolutely. But coming back to the question of the structural aspects involved to that, because something that I see a lot in policy discussions in Brussels and something that I struggle a lot with is the fact that, when you're at a policy panel discussion, and that applies both to men and women, you see everyone sort of, taking shelter into their own employers. I'm not talking from my heart, but I'm talking on behalf of my organization. Very rigid discussions, very over-scripted discussions. And that comes a lot, very often from the leadership of their respective organizations, where you need to stay on message, you need to stay on point through your policy positions and all that. And I talk about it a lot with women that I've coached and people who are around me and work with very hierarchical organizations, the Commission just being an example. And I want to believe that you can stay on message and you can represent your organization, but you can still be authentic and represent your personal touch. But how do we get there? Like how difficult it is, or what would you recommend to anyone who will take the stage soon and will be speaking, on behalf of an NGO or trade association or institution and representing their policy positions, but stay authentic to themselves? Because it seems very difficult to many.
Yeah, of course. And it's also due to, of course, public speaking means, oh my God, I'm speaking in front of so many people, so I better stay close to my script to not make any mistakes, right? Of course, it's always a very stressful situation. What I do when I'm a moderator and I notice that people are very, let's say, on message or also very nervous is to support them in being authentic is, first of all, to set the atmosphere in a way. I mean, pre-talks are really important. I feel that every panel, when they come together beforehand already, either in the green room behind the scenes or in a call beforehand and actually warm up amongst each other, I feel that then there's a different, let's say, atmosphere and warmth between the people on stage, and the facades go down a little bit already. So it's about connection. When there's a connection between the people on stage, there will be a connection to the audience already. And then the second thing is, or my recommendation to anybody representing an institution and thinking, oh my God, I need to stay on message, is still, we're all human beings representing these organizations. The organizations are made of us human beings. So yes, we have a message and we have values or business goals we stand for, or political goals. But we will be so much more relatable as organization and so much more credible and create trust with our message when we tell stories. And that can mean, for example, I once or recently moderated a panel of ambassadors. So of course they have to, this is the most extreme situation where they represent a country, so they have to stay on message. And it was a female ambassador panel. And I cracked them up, to be honest, by asking them, may I ask you about your experience as a woman representing your country here? When did it make a difference, or how do you include other women? And then all of a sudden the body language changed because they could tell a personal story, and they could still stay on message representing the values of their country here. But still, when it comes to being authentic, it's about sharing our personal story. It doesn't have to be, there's a difference between private, of course, and personal. How did you experience? What did you go through? Of course, it takes a little leap of faith to open up like that, but it will be rewarded so much in trust. And of course, that means we're authentic. And when we are authentic, we create connection with the audience. And then they make us trust and believe also the messages that we may be reading from our script.
And you're right. And this is where also there's this idea that, we can make the message ours. I always tell my mentees and people who ask me about that, you can stay on topic and you can stay on message, but still add your personal touch, but still make it yours. I mean, I would understand that majority of cases, people who are representing an organization or are representing certain views is because they believe in them. There are still people who will still do it for the money and don't really believe in what they are saying. But for the most part, especially I think if we get more to the millennial Gen Z side, people will believe to some extent in the positions that they are representing. So I always tell them, try to make it yours. Try to give your personal touch, your personal flavor to it. Maybe even say I instead of we. We believe. I mean, so of course, they understand that you will represent your organization.
Yeah, or how you have achieved something. For example, I speak on a lot of diversity and inclusion conferences, and there's organizations who say, we stand for diversity and inclusion. That's a statement. It doesn't yet tell anything about you, really. And then the question is, and how, what were your, I sometimes ask, what were your struggles getting there? Or what are the challenges that you're facing? All of a sudden, stories to tell, showing how it's an imperfect, messy process, right? Right? Also that we don't represent ourselves as we're perfect, we're sustainable, or we're diverse. Obviously, anybody who aims for sustainability and diversity, it's a totally messy, bumpy road. So sharing a little bit of the challenges, again, makes us relatable because every organization is struggling. So, there's nothing wrong about sharing a bit more behind the scenes about the process, what went right, what went wrong, what are you still working on, what is unclear to you, what are you discussing internally. I think these are all great, let's say, questions behind the statements, behind the message that we can elaborate on and that will create authenticity.
And there's still so many questions that I would want to ask you. So I think I will leave them to the next episode that we record on, I don't know, hopefully season 2 of She Owns the Stage. But I always like to end up the episodes with some rapid fire questions on the topic of owning the stage and on the topic of women leadership. The first question is, what is the best public speaking advice that someone has ever given you?
It is about being yourself, showing yourself, because there is only one you. And when we are authentic, there is no competition. That is the best advice I've ever gotten. When we are ourselves, then we don't need to try harder or be someone, because then we stand for something, and that is the best advice I've gotten.
Do you have any kind of habit or ritual that you do before going on stage to get in the zone, to calm your nerves?
Yes, and I give it to all my mentees as well. It is to set an intention. Because no matter how stressful, how nervous we are, how insecure we may feel, setting an intention, it can be, for example, I want to create a sense of togetherness in the room, or I want to inspire one woman today who's there and who feels seen in the audience. Because when we think of one person, we will probably touch more. Or an intention can also be, I want to help this panel or this conference here to move forward and to see, in today's time, for example, to be confident again about the future. That can be an intention that is not spelled out. I'm not coming on stage and saying, my intention today is, but I represent it somehow. And that also gives me more freedom in how I say things. I don't have to be so scripted then, because it's somehow set, and the magic is it normally works. There's normally people afterwards who come, oh my God, you created such a sense of togetherness in the room. And I'm like, it was my intention.
Yeah.
So
that's a great tip.
Yeah. So intention is different from a goal, right? A goal is, I want to have a 45-minute discussion and it should go really snappy and well. Intention comes from the heart. It's a more deeper thing, and people normally feel it. And it usually works really well.
Nice. How would you define your voice, or Helene Banner, in 3 words?
Yes, I have to say the word authentic, because it's been my own quest, and it's still a journey to be myself. European, definitely, because I realize, even being a business person based in Germany, all my clients are international. I travel Europe for my job. So I also still represent Europe, even if I'm, pausing from the European Commission. Maybe it's something I'm still striving for, but feminine, because it's something with my calling, let's just be imperfect ladies, that I still working on revealing in myself, to dare to be feminine. And to me, that means, in today's serious and tough world, to still daring to be warm, caring, open, vulnerable, surrendering sometimes, even resting. Because I really believe that we need that so much. We're craving for this connection, and especially in very tough business or political situations. I want to be that voice, and I'm training to be that voice more and more.
Mm-hmm. What would you tell your younger self?
I would love to talk to her. Because I would love to talk to her and tell her.
To meet her for coffee.
Yeah.
There was this Instagram trend around that recently, like meeting your younger self for coffee. If you would meet her, what would you tell her?
Oh, I would love that. I would actually tell her, you know what? Nobody may tell you this, but I would love to talk to my 25-year-old, right? I was entering my European Commission work. If you ever get weird looks in the room, or somebody makes weird compliments, or you feel like they're not listening to you, it has nothing to do with you. Keep going, keep spelling out your voice, keep showing up, because it will probably be because of the room, not because of you, that you feel excluded or not heard. I hadn't known that there was a structural disadvantage to be a woman, especially when your job has to do with influence and power and decision making. I was really, thankfully, perhaps, but in this naive state that, hey, we have come so far on gender equality. Of course, I'll be taken seriously if I'm a 30-year-old manager at the European Commission. It didn't happen, and I doubted myself a lot because you get so much weird reactions. And I would have loved to tell her, keep going, you're on the right path. You have no idea how much you represent, women here, and how much you're changing because you are young, because you are a woman, because you are funny and sensitive. You're changing the world.
Oh my God, younger Helen would be so proud. What would you tell your older self? What is something that you wouldn't want your older self to ever forget?
First of all, I want to say, oh God, I want to meet you so hard. I want to know. I'm looking forward to being you. To be honest, I really do. Yeah. It's one of the techniques I also do in my mentorings is to connect to ourself who's 20 years older, which for many women is like, oh my God, I'll be, and then we imagine our age. And I'm 40 now, so I can't wait to be 60, to be honest. And that's what I say to all women, oh my God, you'll be so wise and the experience, and you will be so proud of everything you've achieved. And this is freaking sexy to be have so much achieved. You can be so proud. I can't wait to celebrate with her. And no matter how wrinkly or weird I will be, I will celebrate. And yeah, I'm already celebrating her now.
Oh my God. I already want to meet her too.
Let's have champagne together.
Yeah, in 20 years. Yeah, I'll send you the Google and the calendar invite. Amazing. So then what would you tell her that, never forget to...
Oh, I would first of all thank her that she was me and that she went through all of that with me. And I would tell her, hey, keep going, girl, because you have a lot of decades ahead of you still to change the world. So I would also encourage her to... and again, age is also, again, a discrimination thing, right? I think, oh wow, at our old age, we're going to be so wise and experienced, and to still take that seriously, and how much we have to give back. I want to ask her, please keep giving back.
Amazing. I'm really curious to also get to know her. So indeed, in 20 years' time, we're going to grab coffee. We're going to have champagne, bubbles, maybe here at the podcast studio.
I think we should have another podcast in 20 years. Exactly.
Indeed. I hope the next time will not take 20 years. But I think it's been an excellent conversation, really. I think this is really what everything that She Owns the Stage stands for, about authenticity, about speaking up, about not giving up, about keep being vocal and defending the values that we believe in. So thank you so much, Helen, for having joined us today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much, Anna, for giving me the stage today and for being such an amazing host. I can't wait to listen to your episodes.
And thank you so much to everyone who is joining us and listening in. I think it's been really a great conversation. I'm already excited for the next guests to come, or for future conversations also with Helen as well. If you like this podcast, you know the drill. Subscribe to it, recommend it to your friends, share with someone who might want to hear some little pep talk about speaking authentically and with impact on stage. And see you at the next episode.